Civil War is the newest film written and directed by Alex Garland, the man behind such films as Ex Machina and Annihilation, and it tells the story of a group of journalists traveling to Washington, D.C. to interview the president in the midst of a second civil war that has swept over all of America. Now, before I went into this one, I checked out Alex Garland's filmography. Ex Machina is a decent science fiction film, even though I find it pretty overrated, but it is still enjoyable in aspects. Annihilation is a really cool cosmic horror film, but even that one I didn't personally love. But then when you get to Men, that came out back in 2022, that one is so beautiful on technical aspects, like how it was shot, how it sounds, but just overly gross and so heavy-handed with the points that it wants to do. I would attribute some of my reservations with Civil War maybe to the experience, what everyone had been saying about Men, because this being a political action thriller, at least that's how the trailers presented it coming out in an election year, it just seemed like it was going to be heavy-handed, just trying to push some sort of agenda. And I'm so happy to tell you guys that one of the main positives I have about this film is that basically anyone can watch this film and just be left to their own devices, their own questions, their own interpretations of the film without feeling like they're having their toes stepped on, without feeling like the film is trying to hammer home one particular idea. And that is because it is a very observational film. And I'll get back into more of those aspects in a minute. But seriously, there is one scene with Kirsten Dunst where she literally tells one of the other characters, we don't ask questions, we just take the pictures so that other people can ask those questions. And I was telling my friends after we came out of the theater that basically that might as well be discussing Alex Garland in this film as a whole, because this film is just so fly on a wall-ish that it's just Alex Garland photographing what could actually happen, this war, apocalypse even, I would stretch to say. He's just photographing it how it is and letting us, the viewers, decide what we feel about it. What conclusions are we going to make? It's not even discussed which side is which one's Republicans, which one is the Democrats, and I'm so glad it doesn't go into that because it's so open to interpretation. Even without the political side of everything in there, it just works as a very tense and investing story and experience. It is such a beautiful looking film, like all of Alex Garland's other films. But what makes this one really unique is that despite having great use of color, despite having great set design, there's an aspect to this film where it's mixing beauty with absolute carnage. That in the same shot, you'll have perfectly framed, picturesque views of landscapes and like these small towns. And everything is so well staged, but there's like bodies on the ground. There's, people hanging off of bridges. It's like the film is trying to process those two different emotions, and at the same time you're trying to process those two different emotions as well. And just like pictures of historical events or just pictures in general, there's a sense to a lot of scenes where they just speak for themselves. And that's another thing I want to touch on, that the dialogue in this film, it's there when it's needed, but to me this was a very silent, just thoughtful experience that just lets you sit with all this imagery, throws you in suddenly into this scenario where they don't really explain the politics of what's going on. And for some people that really like exploring the political side of things, that really like more dense plots, maybe some people wouldn't be as satisfied with this film, but I was, because it was a simple story that just throws you into this crazy scenario, even though I was also telling my friends that as over the top as some of these things could be to certain people, to me, nothing of it seemed out of proportion. It just seemed like at the state that our country is in right now, everything in this film, we're not that far from it, unfortunately. Looking at that, It just throws you into that scenario without giving you exposition, and it just allows you to be able to sit and experience all of it with characters that are actually pretty good. Which I heard one review saying that this was an idea-heavy film over an emotional piece, and I actually disagree with that. I think this film pulls quite a bit of emotions out of you in these great performances. And I will say that these characters aren't like the traditional types of characters you see in movies usually. They're not overly developed, but through these great performances, they feel like real people. Especially Kaylee Spaney, I hope I get that name right. She was fantastic in A24's Priscilla last year, and she's incredible here again. I can't wait to see what else she does. And she brings such a sense of innocence, also touching on like, broken innocence when she's having to go through these war zones and photograph and encounter these really tense, like horrific scenarios. This grim, bleak story still able to present this side of this youthfulness that should be protected. And then when you get to Kirsten Dunst, I think this is the best performance I've ever seen from her, and she's very stoic. She doesn't have as much dialogue in this film as you would expect, with her being the main character. With that, I feel like it was also a very visual performance, that there was a lot of emotion hidden behind her seriousness. The dynamic between those two characters in the film was the heart and soul of all the destruction that was going on in the film, all the bleakness, that these two characters still managed to add that sense of humanity. The one thing that could be a bit divisive for people is how it ends. Not because of political stuff or anything, but because the note that this film chooses to go on versus like what the traditional Hollywoodized version of it would be. And at first when it happened, I was a bit mixed on it. But now, when I've had time to think about it, I really appreciate it because it isn't that Hollywoodized ending, and also the fact that it ends in a spot where the conflict is not done for these characters, just as our situation in our country is not nearly close to being done for us. And just the more I've thought about it, the last sequence of this film, I absolutely love. There is one small gripe I have with the film, though, and that is that when you get to the third act, it is more action-heavy. The action is great. It's very well put together, and again, it's great set pieces and everything, but I enjoyed the first two-thirds slightly more because those had more subtlety, those had more like simple tension to them, and then you get to the third act and it's more action-based stuff happening, but then, again, you get that ending and it's so great and everything that I was absolutely mesmerized with Civil War. It is absolutely the best thing that Alex Garland has given me personally to date. I'm going to give this film an A. It's probably going to end up being in my top 5 of the year. That's how good it was. I'm still surprised at how good it actually was. But guys, what'd you think of Civil War? If you've seen it, let me know down below in the comment section. Guys, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, and guys, as always, I'll catch you next time.